Hi, this is Pastor Bill from Park Place Church in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I hope you had a wonderful weekend and you were able to join us for worship yesterday, either on Facebook or on YouTube. You know, back in 1967, a new pastor came to our church in Somerset, Massachusetts. And he was very different from the previous pastor. I still remember the buzz on that first Sunday. You know, many of us hadn't even seen him or met him yet. And the first thing you noticed was his youthful appearance and his rapid pace of movement. See, our previous pastor had been older and moved in a more measured, dignified manner. The previous pastor had also been clean shaven, but our new pastor had a dark black mustache and a goatee. Some of the older members also had an issue with the white robe which he wore, which was so different from the black robe our previous pastor always wore. I remember there were some comments like, "Oh, I don't know how long he's going to last." And that was before they even heard him preach. After he preached, things weren't all that better. He didn't have the deep, dark, baritone richness to his voice that our people were accustomed to. Instead, he had kind of a high-pitched voice that even squeaked sometimes. After the first service, during our coffee hour, I had an opportunity to meet him and to speak with him. And the first thing he said to me was, "Call me Tom." He immediately expressed his interest in young people, and he wanted to know all about what activities and ministries we had. Now, as I'm writing today about this pastor who had such an impact on my life, I realize there's so many stories I could share. But I'll save them for another day. Today, I have this one story I want to share with you. It's about the church bell. It was during his second or third week at the church, I believe, when he asked me to come to the church to help with a special project. And he told me, "Wear grubby clothes, we're going to get dirty." He took me upstairs into a room that had been used years ago as the church hall, before the new building had been constructed. And then he opened the closet and pointed and said, "We're going up there." We climbed an old wooden ladder and we squeezed through a small opening that led into another small chamber. And the ladder continued up through another opening into an even smaller chamber. But there it was, our destination, the church bell, hanging there in the steeple. He looked at me and he said, "Bill, this is our mission. You notice there is no rope connected to the clapper on the bell? Well, we're going to change that." And he tied the long rope, which he had brought up with him, to the eyelet at the bottom of the clapper. And then we carefully fed the rope over to a metal pulley on the side wall, then down through the drilled holes in the floor of each chamber, until the rope hung down into the closet. We stood in the closet admiring our work and said, "Let's ring that bell." Now, I'd never heard the bell rung before. We pulled the rope and the sound that pealed through the building carried out into the churchyard. People across the street in the ballpark could hear the sound of the bell. It seemed to resonate through the entire neighborhood. He thanked me for helping him and he said, "Now, I want you to get here early every Sunday. And at 9:45, I want you to ring the bell. Then ring it again at 9:55, and finally one more time at 10 o'clock. And when I hear the 10 o'clock ring, we'll begin the service." I remember that first Sunday we rang the bell. There were some that had never heard it rung before. But there were a few older members that said it had been years since the bell had been rung. Another woman, she had been a member for over 60 years, commented that the sound of the bell always meant she better walk a little faster or she would be late for church. our new, very different pastor, still had a lot of challenges to overcome. But the simple ringing of the bell brought a large number of the senior members into his fold. Now let me share with you another treasure from Grampy Craig's scrapbook. I think it's very appropriate. It's called Why Don't They Ring the Bell Now? My little son and I stood on the village square of my old hometown. It was an exhilarating Sunday morning. There, said I, as I pointed to a dilapidated church house, there is where my father used to go to church when he was a boy. Twice each Sunday, Father used to ring that church bell. And when the people heard the bell, they all came to church to worship God. I had scarcely ceased speaking when my son looked up and said, Daddy, why don't they ring the bell now? I stood there, looking at the silent bell. The leaning steeple seemed to come closer, and I was lost in the memories of the past. There was a tug at my hand, and the child's voice said again, Daddy, why don't they ring the bell now? And with that voice, I seemed to hear the voices of children from all over the countryside. Poor, ragged, sad, wicked children with no place to go to learn of life. All these stretched out their hands, pleading, why don't they ring the bell now? Sick children called to me in weak and faint voices, lonely ones looking at me pitifully. In many voices they all cried, why don't they ring the bell now? I looked about that Sunday morning and I saw one man mowing his lawn. Across the street a family was putting a picnic lunch into the car. And farther down another man sat on the porch yawning. In his driveway another was polishing his new car, and still another was pruning his hedge. On nearby stone steps 3 children sat absorbing the comic section of a big Sunday newspaper. Is this America? I thought. Was this what our forefathers did to make America great? Why were these people not in church? If our fathers in their day could not live without the church, can we live without it in this day of new and greater sin? With the passing of our fathers, will the church also pass? I lifted my voice with the voice of my son, and we cried, why don't they ring the bell now? You know, over the last few months, I've watched people searching for something. Maybe something they had and misplaced, or something they remember from an earlier time, but they don't know where it's gone, or maybe even something they've never had. I've heard people returning to prayer. And in challenging times like we're going through now, we hear more references to people asking for prayer and others responding, I'm praying for you and your family. Please know you are in my thoughts and my prayers. We've also seen an increased number of people viewing our services online, sometimes between 100 to 200 people. We've also picked up a following for these little chats on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Pastor Wayne's gift of words and music on Tuesday and Thursday. Could it be that many of us are longing to hear that bell rung again? Pray with me. Loving God, we're longing for a closeness with you and our church family. We want to hear that old bell calling us back together again. Lord, draw us back to you in prayer, in Bible study, in fellowship with church family. May our cry not be any longer, why don't they ring the bell now? Amen. Thanks for joining me today. Please watch for Pastor Wayne's gift of words and music tomorrow. And I'll see you back here again on Wednesday. God bless all of you.